is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea, then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Caleb Holloman. Today we'll be covering weird news from Saber-Tooth Anchovies, 6,000 pounds of missing chickpeas, and an opera house in Spain that, during quarantine, performed for 2,000 potted plants in the absence of humans. And if you stick around to the end, I'll give you my top 10 weird news conspiracy theories. Let's get started. Alright, so saber-tooth anchovies. That's right, anchovies. So these are the same fish that you put on Caesar salads and pizzas. But these fossils are showing that they used to be pretty vicious predators back in the day. You know, back 40 million years ago. This was first published by the Royal Society, so this is pretty official stuff coming to you. So they actually found two different species of these saber-toothed anchovies. These were fossilized creatures. Both of them were found in the Mideast. The first one found was called Clupiosis, and it was discovered in Belgium. And it was found in the 1940s, and they just got around to examining it now, about 80 years later. So the people who found it never really got to figure out that, you know, they found a saber-toothed anchovy, which to me is a huge disappointment. Because if I had been the guy who discovered that, I mean, I'd put that on my tombstone. It's pretty amazing stuff. Two specimens were collected in 1977 by a joint expedition of the University of Michigan and the Geological Survey of Pakistan. So, 45 to 50 million years ago, in a sea that is on top of what is now Pakistan, there were 3 feet long anchovies. Now, these anchovies had a bottom row of sharp teeth that resembled shark teeth, except they weren't in rows like sharks. They were just one row of sharp, razor-sharp teeth. And then on the top row of teeth, they had a giant saber tooth. So I think this really puts things into perspective. I mean, we think we have it hard now with COVID and riots and brutality. But 45 million years ago, people had to be worried about anchovies. So when these creatures, when they close their mouths, This is what the scientists said. The saber tooth would have extended from the top of the mouth all the way down to the bottom of its chin. So that's probably why they went extinct. They got tired of being made fun of for having a giant buck tooth. I can't imagine the evolutionary benefit of that either, just having one giant tooth up top. Especially as a fish, it doesn't make very much sense. This also brings to mind that Caesar salads must have been really expensive back then. Did you get the fish to make the dressing? Yeah, chef, but we lost 12 men in the process. That's good. Fatten up the fish, no? CT scans conducted on the fossils revealed the very unique structure of the teeth, that bottom row of sharp teeth, which is very scary to think of, and then the top row of teeth, which is just the one saber tooth, which is clearly just meant for impaling larger prey and giving it a nice quick kill. You know, the nice way to handle things. These same CT scans show that they basically are exactly the same as modern day anchovies. And after they did these measurements, they went and did CT scans on modern-day anchovies and found that modern-day anchovies also have rows of sharp teeth. They're just too small to be recognized. Scientists also suspect that this tooth was not only for predatorial reasons, but also as a defense mechanism, which makes absolute sense to me. I mean, I like sardines on my pizza, but if they came with a giant tooth in them, I think that's a hard pass for me. Now, people like me who are already terrified of the ocean, I was terrified of the ocean at a young age. When I was a kid, I was playing on Laguna Beach in California, and I got stung by a stingray. Which, it has its good and its bad things, like everything else. So the good part of that was that I can say that I survived what killed the crocodile hunter. The bad news is it hurt like hell. So now I have sardines to worry about too. Now, well. So how did this ancient monstrosity come about? Well, approximately 66 million years ago, give or take, a global mass extinction wiped out not only dinosaurs, but predatory fishes and reptiles. And a lot of these species dying out left a vacancy in the marine ecosystems. So these scientists think that these anchovies developed these saber teeth in order to fill the lack of predatory fishes after the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. So that's pretty interesting. They're kind of like dinosaurs 2.0, these anchovies. Now, the same scientists also think that these anchovies didn't simply go extinct. They think they evolved into mackerels, tuna, barracudas. I don't know if you've ever been bitten by a barracuda, but here in Colorado we do fishing a lot, and I've been bitten by a barracuda, and by God, that is not a swell time, I'll tell you that. I can very well see where they get their ferociousness from, these saber-tooth anchovies. Almost lost a finger to one of these guys once. Bad day. The scientists also said that saber-tooth anchovies are a perfect example of such failed evolutionary experiments. Short-lived groups that did not survive to the modern day with remarkable adaptations that cannot be predicted on the basis of living species. So all in all, it's hard to tell what happened to these species, why they didn't continue to exist. My guess is it's because they have a giant buck tooth on their top row of teeth. I wouldn't want to exist either. When asked what the possible explanation could be for these predatory fishes not surviving to today, the scientist answered that maybe they simply couldn't compete with modern predatory fishes such as sharks or even dolphins. Many people don't know that they're predators. Another explanation suggests that their extinction might be a result of global climate changes that have occurred since the swarm in the seas. Anchovies swim in packs, and when you have a predatory animal swimming in packs and the climate changes and they don't have any food, they're all going to die very quickly. That's the problem with being a predator, is you have to have a lot of food to keep up that, that's a lot of calcium for a big old fang in the front of your teeth. But ultimately the scientists concluded that there's not enough data to know. The scientists went on to say that this is a very important discovery because it shows how marine life evolves preceding a mass extinction event. So, that could really come in handy for us sooner or later. It also says in this article that these anchovies lived at the same time and place as some of the earliest four-legged whales. So, I had to look this up too because, I don't know about you, but I didn't have a clue that whales had 4 legs 50 million years ago. But it turns out they did, and they actually resembled giant otters. They had hips and everything. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how I couldn't have known this. And then their skulls are found all over South America, often showing off a single row of teeth resembling large sharks or megalodons. So this is all very encouraging to see exploration. We have anchovies with giant saber tooths. We have whales with 4 limbs and shark teeth. And By God, that's a useless fact and a half for you there, isn't it? The whales had a large tail and 4 legs with hooved toes that were likely webbed, making the creature well adapted to both land and sea. So these creatures could chase you across land. You think you find a lake, you can swim away from it, it'd catch you in a second. It'd be quite embarrassing, frankly. Oh, while it chomped on your corpus. Whales and dolphins are already known to have adapted over the years from 4-legged land animals. How is this well known? I've never even considered the possibility that dolphins had 4 legs at some point in time. Can you imagine a 4-legged dolphin? That would be the best pet on the planet. That would be simply amazing. It's said that they have traveled from South Asia all the way to South America. How remains a mystery. I probably swam. Now, according to Travis Park, a whale expert, whales are this iconic example of evolution. They went from small hoofed mammals, much like a horse, to the blue whale we have today. It is so interesting to see how they conquered the oceans. Now, these early whales and dolphins with 4 legs could actually not swim 100% of the time. That's why they had the legs. They had to go onto land in order to recover. They could swim for, quote, weeks at a time, according to Oliver Lambert. And then the whale expert went on to say that the sharp teeth and long snout has evolved to eat crustaceans. So these whales had teeth that were sharp enough to literally break through hard shells and get the little meat that was inside there. It's just vicious, man. 45 million years ago, the competition for food was very steep. Lambert goes on to say that it wasn't until 41 million to 35 million years ago where whales became fully aquatic, filling in an ecological niche left vacant when the last marine reptiles, along with the dinosaurs, went extinct 66 million years ago. So it took them about, 30 million years to fill that niche and evolve into what we know as today as whales. The more you know. Now, I actually find these whales much more frightening than these anchovies. I mean, they're not too big. They're only 13 feet long. They lived 42.6 million years ago. But they had 4 legs, they could run on land, they were giant whales that could run on land, and they have giant rows of sharp teeth. And many scientists say that when people think they have megalodon teeth, they're often these whale teeth. So that just shows you the scale and the power of these predators had. It's pretty frightening to think of a whale on land chasing you with very sharp teeth. Thank God it said that it usually ate in water, so we don't really have to worry about that. It's because of its mobility in water opposed to its lack of mobility on land that it evolved to lose its hips and its legs to become what we know as the modern whale. So that's fairly interesting. Looking at the pictures online, it shows these creatures looking like giant platypuses with... God knows how many teeth. That is just frightening. I mean, they really look far more frightening than any shark looks to me. Similar to the anchovies, these whales were found outside of India and Pakistan. I mean, man, that area is just not looking friendly to ancient humans. Scientists believe that the creature would resemble an otter and may have been an early form of the whale that was not fully transitioned into living in water. So these animals started out living in water, just like all animals did. Then they found their way onto land and quickly realized, hey, there's a lot more food I can savagely devour in the water. Let me go back in there and raise some offspring to further, wreck the ecosystem. Now, let me tell you, folks, this is what I want to see come out of this whole expedition into saber-tooth anchovies and four-legged whales. All this, I think, is culminating into what could really make a quality film. Jaws 5, Anchovies Revenge. Anchovies team up with the goddamn four-legged whales. They come on land and they just slaughter people. I mean, it's vicious. It's a horror movie. It's not an adventure movie like the original Jaws. No, that was child's play. Now we got anchovies and whales. They're coming after you. They're gonna get you, man. They're after you. Blockbuster hit right there. It's already copyrighted, so don't bother trying to steal it from me. Alright, well, it's time to take a break. Stick around. Our next segment is going to be about 6,000 pounds of chickpeas that have gone missing. The heist of 6,000 pounds of chickpeas. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. That last segment about saber-tooth sardines was hotter than a $2 pistol. Coming up, I'll give you my top 10 weird news conspiracy theories, but for now, I have to bring something to light. The case of 6,150 pounds of missing chickpeas. That's right, garbanzo beans, the kind you use in soup, the kind you use in hummus. I think that's just about it. I don't know. I'm not a hummus master, you know. So this actually happened a few weeks ago. A small restaurant called Little Sesame ordered 6,150 pounds of chickpeas, as you do. And the UPS says that they delivered the package, just a giant sack of chickpeas, I suppose, that didn't require a sign-off or anything. The UPS claims that they delivered the package to the restaurant in Washington, D.C., but the restaurant says they never received the package. See, people, this is why you have to pay the extra 50 cents to get the signature requirement on your deliveries. It's very, very important. I think we can all learn from Little Sesame's mistake here. But frankly, I think this is also the fault of the chickpea distributor, that they sent 6,150 pounds of chickpeas all in one delivery. Anyways, Little Sesame is an Israeli-style fast casual eatery in Washington, D.C. Little Sesame orders these chickpeas for their famous falafels. They get them all from one farmer in Montana named Casey Bailey. Bailey was said to have shipped the package. The package was said to have arrived by UPS, but the package was last seen in Landover, Maryland. So there's no word of whether or not this actually ever arrived in Washington, D.C., but amidst everything crazy that's going on now, I honestly don't think that this is at the top of everybody's list of concerns. The entire load was estimated to be worth $15,000 for the entire bundle. So, I don't know, maybe somebody was walking down the street at the right time, saw the sack of garbanzo beans, and, they knew the value of it, and they were like, hey, I could use $15,000 worth of hummus. I mean, I know I could. $15,000. I mean, that's just absolutely brutal. I think the most I ever lost in the mail was like a $3 ABBA record. And I was completely demobilized by the emotional scars left by the experience. That was a long summer. Anyways, I can't imagine what it must be like for this restaurant, right? They just finally get to open after all this quarantine stuff going on, and bam! All of a sudden, they lose just basically an unmeasurable amount of product. I mean, most people can't even conceive what 6,150 pounds of garbanzo beans looks like. Now, the restaurant annually uses 50,000 pounds of chickpeas a year. I don't know what they're doing with these chickpeas, but that is just an absurd amount of garbanzo beans. So 50,000 pounds, so they lost, 6,000? So that's 12% of their annual supply that they lost, which doesn't sound too bad compared to, they lost 6,000 pounds. So I think it's good to step back and look at the percentage versus the actual amount to realize that they're probably gonna. I think Little Sesame is gonna make it through these hard times, right? With quarantine and garbanzo beans, they're going through hell. So if you live out in Washington D.C., why not throw a little patronage their way? They could use it right now. All right. And frankly, I don't think you should feel too bad for them. The real victims here are the customers. Now they have to go without chickpeas for Christ knows how long, while, Big Hummus gets their crap together. It's kind of pathetic. I thought the restaurants in Washington, D.C. were still closed due to COVID, but I guess they're getting enough business to require 6,000 pounds of a dry, flat bean dip, which is just frankly ridiculous for a restaurant that's been closed for several months. Let's do a quick calculation here, folks. You're seeing this live. 50,000 divided by 365. These people go through 136 pounds of garbanzo beans a day. That's just insane. I can't even imagine how much that is. It's like a barrel of hummus per day. I wonder how many chips they use. So, I don't want to start any conspiracy theories, but I think this might be a violation of antitrust laws. I have an inkling that this is an act of collusion between Big Hummus and the restaurant Little Sesame. So give me a chance, folks, and to explain what I think happened. Big Hummus saw their numbers declining during quarantine, right? Everybody's numbers were declining. People are getting desperate. And Big Hummus, they see their opportunity. And let's face facts. Nobody stuck at home for 3 months seeks comfort in the bottom of bean dip, right? I mean, especially when Big Queso has the culture and Big Avocado has the best press agents on the planet with the possible exception of coconut oil. So due to declining sales, Big Hummus and Little Sesame collude, you see. And here's the plan. Little Sesame orders 6,000 pounds of beans and Big Hummus delivers. Only instead of delivering 6,000 pounds of a sack of beans, they deliver 6,000 pounds of goddamn dried ice. This is what they did, right? Because it just vanished into thin air. And what does that? Dried ice. The good people at UPS drop the package off in 30 minutes in a hot alley of the District of Columbia, and the 6,000 pound contents is gone. Big Hummus pockets their 15 G's for the beans, which is really a few bucks worth of dry ice. And Little Sesame files an insurance claim on their misplaced product. Big Hummus and Little Sesame laugh their way to the bank. Ha ha ha. Or maybe it just got lost or stolen. Look, one theory is as good as another, frankly. So the reason Little Sesame had ordered so much chickpea is because they have become synonymous with hummus. It has actually become world famous. They have garnered many travelers internationally abroad in order to eat their hummus, which is kind of ridiculous. But anyways, that's why it's very important that they find the 3 tons of hummus that went missing. Nick Wiseman, co-owner of Little Sesame, has put out a help call. #ChickpeaGate, which I think is going to go down in the history books, folks. I'm not going to lie to you. And the reward for finding these 3 tons of chickpeas is 1 year of free hummus. So, look, I don't want to incite anyone to make immoral decisions, but what would you rather have? 15 grand worth of chickpeas or a year of hummus? I think I'd rather take the 15 grand. Wiseman went on to say, what's hard about it is he only grows a certain amount a year, and we're his only direct buyer. A lot of chickpeas are grown just for us. There's not a lot of extra crop that can be rerouted. We'll recover and he'll recover, and the relationship will live on, but it's definitely a disruption. So if you're looking to remedy this tragedy, please notify the police if you see 6 tons of chickpeas. Wiseman believes that UPS insurance will cover the loss of the chickpeas, considering the fact that they never even entered Washington, D.C., according to the shipment tracking. He goes on to say that he's worried about future shipments. If they can lose 6,000 pounds of garbanzo beans, what else could they lose? So for reference, 6,000 pounds of garbanzo beans is about half a semi-truckload. That's how much went missing. I have no idea how this happened. I don't know how it didn't get captured on any cameras. It might be why I'm bringing up the whole conspiracy issue. But now they've put out several distress calls looking for the garbanzo beans because they've got to be somewhere. They couldn't just vanish off the face of the earth, right? We don't have that kind of technology to make garbanzo beans disappear. Ridiculous. Okay, so it should be noted that although this means that they would run out of garbanzo beans within a week, they have already settled several deals with other distributors. They ordered these beans from a distributor that could barely produce any more than the 6,000 pounds, so they were in quite a hot seat when this initially broke, but now they have more options. They have several distributors delivering their garbanzo beans, so people of Washington, D.C., there is nothing to worry about. Calm down. You will have your hummus. So help me God, you will have your hummus. So, I don't know exactly why, but this story brings to mind a story from a few years ago. I don't know if you guys remember this, but in the middle of New York, it was, I think it was like 2 p.m. or something, just a busy day. A man walks up to an armored Loomis truck, grabs a 90-pound bucket of gold, and then just walks away. I think it took them like 2 years to catch the guy, but it turns out this bucket of gold was worth, I think, $1.6 million or something like that. Then he ended up losing it after he hit it. So somebody else found it, but it just, I don't understand in the time of, that we're in the era of information. There isn't a store that doesn't have an external camera in these large cities, Washington, D.C., New York City, and yet people can get away with stealing $1.6 million of gold out of the back of a truck, and then UPS can get away with losing 6,000 pounds of beans. It's kind of just, I don't really understand it. I know I don't understand much. You guys have probably gathered that from the past episode, but it kind of just boggles my mind that we have access to so much these days, and yet we can manage to lose 6,000 pounds of beans or $1.6 million in gold just from either not paying attention. I think that seems to be the central issue here. We don't know if the beans were stolen. We don't know if they were misplaced. We don't know if it was an inside job conspiracy. I mean, I know that, but most people don't. So, it's. I think that's what we should take away from this episode this week, is that sometimes you just should pay attention, even if you think that it's difficult to lose 6,000 pounds of beans. Maybe it's appropriate to double check your inventory and make sure it's actually on the truck. Or maybe it's important to check your back alley there and make sure it's actually been delivered. Or, maybe you should keep a journal and verify the delivery of $1.6 million in gold. And maybe keep an extra eye on that next time. All right. Okay, time for another break. Stick around. Our next segment is about an opera house in Spain that put on a performance not for humans, but for over 2,000 potted plants, making up the audience. 2,000 potted plants. Stay tuned for that.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. In the last segment, I was harping about some 6,000 pounds of missing chickpeas. Hope they're found before it's too late. But for us, it's time to move on to an opera house in Spain that is holding a performance for 2,292 potted plants. Yeah, that's right, potted plants. No humans in sight except for the cameramen. This is being called Concert for the Bioscene, which is also a great band name if anybody's looking to, create some artistic flavor while also including the environment in on their little game. Lucia Opera Hall, I believe I mispronounced that correctly, in Barcelona, opened for the first time since quarantine began in February. They opened on the 22nd of June, in which this performance took place. They played Crisantemi by Puccini for the 2,292 plants. For those who don't know opera, Crisantemi is not an easy piece to play at all. I don't know opera either, but I tried playing it at home, and by Jove, my performance was simply ass over kettle wrong. I'm more of a ballet guy, actually. Like, I've seen the Nutcracker performances more than I've seen Avengers movies. If you haven't seen the Nutcracker, check it out. A mouse king gets shanked by a bobble-headed Nutcracker. It's amazing. Anyway, the Opera House wanted to make it clear that no social distancing or masks would be required for the concert bioscene. which is great news because 2,292 plants wearing masks. I think that would actually make a great camera shot if they were to stream this live. It would really reinvigorate the people of Spain, I believe. But that's not even the best part. They also said, quote, "When the string quartet of 2 violins, a viola, and cello finish their performance, palms will certainly be pressed together in appreciation." That's the applause. Oh my lord. So, I actually went online and watched the entire 10-minute godforsaken opera performance, and they were not kidding. At the end of the performance, they actually did press the palms together to simulate human clapping. I swear to God, you can look this up. It's something to behold. First of all, it's a 10-minute video, and all of the B-roll footage is just sweeping camera motions over potted foliage in basic theater seats. I mean, the theater is completely filled all the way up to the mezzanine. It's quite bizarre. I actually thought it was really, really funny. So good on them for making me laugh for 10 minutes straight. At the end, they were clapping. The plants actually clapped. They also had giant fans they blew through it, so it sounded like they were talking before the play. The plants were talking before the play, and then the fans died right before the performance started, just simulating an actual audience. They put a lot of thought into this whole plant audience. It's pretty bizarre, actually. And the best part of the entire concert was actually at the beginning. They had one of those announcements you see at movie theaters where they ask everyone to turn off their cell phones. In the video they say, quote, "For the pleasure of the audience, please silence your cell phones." I couldn't make this up. Please go view it on YouTube. It's very worth watching. Now, the Opera House actually got a lot of flack for holding this kind of concert, and it responded, I think, very, very professionally, at least compared to their previous actions. They said, quote, "This action welcomes and leads a highly symbolic act that defends the value of art, music, and nature as a letter of introduction to our return to activity," which I thought was simply downright professional. I mean, these are real class acts over here in Spain. The plants were bought from nearby nurseries, which were also struggling due to COVID-19 lockdowns. So this is really a win-win for everyone around here. The Opera House went on to state that during this strange and painful period, organizers wanted to offer us a different perspective for our return to activity, a perspective that brings us closer to something as essential as our relationship with nature. The state of emergency set by Spain forced the Opera House to close in mid-March. Since then, the country has recorded over 246,000 coronavirus cases, 28,324 of which ended in death. Very sad.
So one of the positive aspects of these mass tragedies like COVID is that it brings about in the community some sort of innovation, and we can see that over the past couple months throughout the performing arts world. You've seen drive-in movies come back, which was exciting. I got to see Jaws in theaters, a movie that came out a decade before I was born. And I also got to see Jurassic Park. All very exciting stuff. Anyways, we're not here to talk about that. In the music world, you see a lot of the same thing. You'll see concerts held that are just being recorded. There are nobody in the seats. That's more of a depressing innovation than anything. Some people are releasing music that they've kept in the vault. My favorite band, Radiohead, has been doing that. They release a new live album every couple of months, and it's just something nice to kind of keep you going through these hard times. And I think this bio concert is another innovation like that. Is it as good as being there in person? Obviously not. But it kind of brings back the spirit we used to have, and just having a taste of that is something really nice to have as we're trying to come back to normal life. Another good example of this is the Dave Chappelle stand-up comedy that he did that went viral very quickly. He doesn't do a lot of stand-up comedy, but he was willing to do it for a combination of COVID and the protesting, and it's actually quite inspirational to see these really difficult times driving out some of our most talented artists. During the normal times, they're a distraction from the news, which is designed to make you angry. They kind of cleanse your soul of all the mundane BS that we fill ourselves with. And I don't want to get too preachy, but I think this concert in Spain is kind of a culmination of that. It kind of puts everything into perspective when they hold a concert for a bunch of plants, and then you see their true motive, which is to perform it live, get a little...
The country's state of emergency actually ended on Sunday, and the cultural Venuses can now reopen with a limited number of spectators. They did have a limited number of spectators, but those were all cameramen. It's very interesting when you watch the video. They have sweeping camera motions over all the foliage. It's quite inspiring, actually. Very uplifting. It kind of represents, the fragility in life that we've experienced over the past 6 months or so. And frankly, I'm all for it. This is just one more way to combat the lockdown. As many people know, other tactics have been used to try to get some sort of revenue into these entertainment spaces. Some of the most popular include drive-in movies, streaming online, and booking empty stadiums just to patronize the actual business itself. Even though you don't get to experience it live, you get to support something you really care about, and I think that's an important part of art. This kind of display is likely to continue throughout the year. It was only recently when Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti said that large gatherings like sports events or concerts may not resume until 2021. So we might see more plant concerts between now and then, which I'm very excited for. I would buy a ticket to a plant concert. I would pay for one of those plants to be in my seat. Frankly, it's an honor. So the placement of the plants as the audience was actually considered an art display in its own right. And the artist who set it up said, quote, "I heard many birds singing and the plants in my garden and outside growing faster. And without a doubt, I thought that maybe I could now relate in a much more intimate way with people and nature." Spain was known as the second European country after Italy to be hit by COVID-19 in such a forceful and relentless manner. Spain is also known to have had one of the harshest and strictest lockdowns, which began in late March. They had a very late response, unfortunately. According to Spain's authorities, the country has been lifting restrictions on COVID-19 based lockdowns in order to restart its economy, which has simply tanked as a result of the shutdowns. June 21st, the day before the concert, was the day that Spain finally lifted its national state of emergency, allowing citizens to travel freely. Okay, so citizens finally get to travel freely, and they say, I want to go see an opera. So they go and they buy a ticket, but when they get to the ticket booth, the man says, "Oh, sorry, there's a plant there." The concert itself was a string quartet doing a performance of Puccini's Crisantemi, which is a famous opera piece. It's very short, though. It's only about 9 minutes long. So unfortunately, the Plants did not get a full-fledged opera performance with, a stage performance. They didn't have any actors or anything on stage, no vocalists whatsoever. And so it was a very tame opening performance, considering the Plants, considering it was simply a quartet rather than a full live opera performance. After the performance, the Plants were subsequently delivered. This is some good news. After the performance, the Plants were subsequently delivered to 2,292 health professionals. Oh, that's nice. Hey, thanks for taking care of our sick and dying people. Here's something else you need to take care of that will inevitably die away. Holy crow. But in all sincerity, this is a nice gift for gift for the people risking their health to help others.
Publicity in the meantime, and then donate the plants to the people who they think are really helping out individuals throughout their society, which is great to see in Spain, one of the countries that has suffered more than any other in this trying time. And so I think it's I don't think it's here to stay, obviously, but it's kind of a reinvigoration of the artistic soul that we lost during this epidemic. And I'm glad to see a little bit of it coming back, step by step, a bit of preparation for normalcy. Might take a year, it might take a decade, but we'll get there. And this is one of the early steps back to getting there.
And as a fan of classical music, the performance was actually pretty great. It's nice and short, only about 10 minutes long, and I recommend you go check it out. You can check it out on www.youtube. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's hilarious and beautiful. Go check it out. But not before the next segment, where we will go over my top 10 weird news conspiracy theories. Stick around for after the break, when we will be discussing that.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and one championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. So, opera is held for foliage is great and all, but now it's time to get into what really matters. My top 10 weird news conspiracy theories. Now, my quick warning to you, this might get a little spicy. If you take conspiracy theories seriously, then you might have a little trouble with this segment. And if you do, you're missing the point of conspiracy theories. It's just to be openly stupid. But I will let you know that some of these conspiracy theories involve death, so if you're uncomfortable with that, maybe this isn't the segment for you. But for those of you who can take it with a grain of salt, let's get started. Alright, number 10, chemtrails. Alright. Starting off with a tamed subject, 1 in every 5 U.S. citizens believe that chemtrails, which are the streaks left behind by airplanes while flying through the sky, are actually used by the government or the New World Order, which we'll get to later, in order to control the United States population. The chemtrails, according to the conspiracy theorists, apparently contain a supposed toxic mix of aluminum, strontium, and barium, which frankly are my go-to elements when I attempt mind control. You know, you just hit them over the head with some aluminum and you are in control. Sorry about that. Okay, number 9. New Coke, another tamed subject. So, quickly after New Coke came out to nearly universal hatred, it was soon replaced with its original formula. And this pushed conspiracy theorists to claim that this was an organized ploy by the soft drink corporation in order to boost sales of the otherwise dated product. When confronted with the conspiracy, the lead advisor of the new Coke product said, quote, "We're not that dumb, and we're not that smart." That's one of my all-time favorite quotes. And I think the government should adopt that as their go-to saying. It should be on the back of like dollar bills and all that. It would give me a lot more respect for our leaders. To admit that they're not the smartest, they're not the dumbest, they're just people like us. So the new Coke conspiracy I find very interesting because literally 0 people like New Coke, so I wonder, it kind of makes a little sense how it would be a marketing ploy, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense considering the fact that it's a huge waste of advertising money and it gives you a huge bad rep, and it crashed their stock. Now, I only took a few business classes in college, but I don't think crashing your stock is a good business position. That's the problem with a lot of these conspiracy theories, is that although they make sense on a very basic level, once you think of it one step ahead, it just completely fumbles. And speaking of that, number 8, the New World Order. This is a very common, typical conspiracy theory that the world is being controlled by international elites, and they live in an underground city beneath the Denver airport. Because if you controlled the entire world, right? If you could bend entire nations through sheer tyranny of will, where would you want to live? Obviously underneath a railroad operating for a crappy airport that sports crappy weather 24/7 annually. It's I love that conspiracy theory. I find it absolutely hilarious that people are controlled. First of all, does there seem like anything's under control, like at the moment? I don't think so. Okay, number 7. The hummus heist. We actually went over this in great deal earlier. The Big Garbanzo and Little Sesame had an insurance scam that profited them both during the economically unfriendly pandemic we are all going through at the current moment. We covered that in detail earlier, so let's move on. Number 6, MK Ultra. This one's a bit dark, so I don't like to spend too much time on dark things. It gets me all moody. And I don't need to be moody. I have no time for that. So basically, this one centralizes around the FBI conducting studies of mind control on humans and animals. This includes giving humans drugs, giving them electrotherapy in order to control their minds. And this one's a bit frightening because there have actually been hearings held on the release of information regarding MK Ultra. So MK Ultra is a thing that happened. The question is, to what extent were they testing human beings and animals? What tactics were they using? How offensive are these tactics? The last hearing was in 2018, and it revealed that the CIA were testing implants that they embedded in 6 different dogs. And these implants would make them run, turn, stop by remote control. It's pretty vague whether or not they got this to work. It's also pretty vague what the utility of this is. So the rundown on this one is that MK Ultra is confirmed to have existed as a CIA covert operation, but the extent of testing on humans is yet to be revealed, or perhaps it never was really that extensive. We may never know. There's a lot of information on this one if you want to continue looking it up, but like I said earlier, it gets a bit dark, which is why I'm not going into depth about it. I like to be happy, man, and I want you to be happy. I like you guys, alright? So let's be happy and move on to number 5. Flat Earth. Alright, number 4. This is a very modern conspiracy theory. Epstein didn't kill... Okay, let's go back to number 5 for a second. Okay, I can't just skip over Flat Earth. This is one of my favorites. I've wanted to start a reality TV show, and in this reality TV show, you would give a flat earther $100,000 to try to prove that the Earth is flat. They can use it to build a rocket to shoot up into space. They can use it for whatever means necessary in order to prove their heart-held position that the Earth is flat. I would just love to see that reality TV show. I would put up my own money for it. If I can find other investors, let's get this done, okay? I mean, it's time. It's 2020. It's time for flat earthers to have a voice and see if they can convince us of what they are so sure of. All right, number 4. Conspiracy theory number 4, Epstein didn't kill himself. This is the most modern of the bunch, and for those who didn't know, this one's also kind of dark. So Jeff Epstein was accused of underage trafficking, and he did this apparently on secret islands where American elites would go to these islands and do the dirty illegally. Non-consensually, it's not okay at all. So while in captivity on suicide watch, Jeff Epstein managed to strangle himself while 2 guards were sleeping. For the cherry on top, the camera recording him in the surrounding areas didn't record the entire hour preceding the incident. I like this one because now everybody makes jokes about this horrible person's end, which I am totally okay with, and I think most of you would be okay with that too. He's kind of a gross human being, and to have a sad end is okay with me. Part of me wonders if the cops didn't actually fall asleep, they just turned off the camera and went and beat the hell out of him, which, I'm not saying I would be obligated to do, but I might have been slightly obligated to do that if he was trafficking underage people. Alright. Number 3, Israel animal spying. This one's one of my favorites. It's absolutely hilarious. So, it's very short, but basically, some people believe that the quote, unquote, Zionists train animals to conduct espionage and to kill people. There's just not much left to say on that one. It kind of speaks for itself. I mean, just the idea of Israelis training dogs and birds to spy for them and then kill when necessary. I think that's a very outlandish one. Took a lot of imagination, but it just shows, people think other people that are their enemies are very capable when it comes to ridiculous things like this. And I think that's one of the funnest part about conspiracy theories is how in order to believe a conspiracy theory, you have to assume competence on the people running the conspiracy. And you just you look around in the modern age and you can't find competence anywhere, so I wonder how you can see competence in people training animals to attack and spy on their enemies. Alright, moving on. Number 2, this is probably what you thought would be number 1, but it's the Kennedy assassination. Now, everybody's heard many takes on this one. My personal favorite is Tom Green's theory that Kennedy's assassination was actually an elaborate suicide. Tom Green proposed this idea that Kennedy got tired of all the fame and attention he was receiving being the leader of the free world during the most, quote, frigid part of the Cold War. It's quite the epigram. So Kennedy couldn't take all the pressure, so he organized a convoluted shooting and had it pegged on a radical communist in order to avoid blame for himself. He also had his wife shot, apparently, in order to hide the fact that he was not responsible. So this one also just obviously makes no sense, but if you don't take it seriously, it's kind of fun to talk about. That's the fun of conspiracy theories, is you get to not take everything seriously for about 5 minutes while you discuss something that you know is not true. And you're just going to make up outlandish things that fly in the face of basic truth. And I think it's pretty entertaining. Now, number 1. This one is number 1 because I actually think this one is true. And this one is that Elliott Smith, the great musician, was murdered. Like I said, this is the only one that I believe to be true. And the reason I believe it to be true is because it's the simplest out of the bunch. It's a very, very simple principle that's hard to overlook. So the brilliant musician was said to have committed suicide at the tragically young age of 34. If you've never listened to Elliott Smith, go listen to Elliott Smith. He's an unbelievably talented writer. If you've seen Good Will Hunting, he did a lot of the soundtrack for that. Now, the reason I believe this one is true is very simple. Smith is said to have killed himself by stabbing his heart twice with a knife. Now, I've never tried it, okay? It should be noted, I've never tried this, but I have to assume that it's hard as hell to stab yourself in the heart once, then to remove the knife and do it again. I mean, I know there are people out there with frightening senses of will, but I'm gonna have to say no on that one. I don't think that happened. I think he was murdered. He's known to have a lot of fights with it. Look, we don't have to get into the details. It's just the simple fact that it's incredibly difficult to stab through your chest plate and into your heart twice. Well, it's been a heck of a weird week for news, hasn't it? And by Jove, look at the time. That was a close shave. I've been your host, Caleb Holloman, and I want to thank you all for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really does help us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the most immediate updates. If you really can't stand to get that information just driven into your head, that's where you should follow us. Thank you and have a good night.